Hi, I'm Michael Shannon, and in this course, I'll specify the different types of malware that organizations must deal with on a daily basis. Nowadays when we use the word virus, it's kind of like, it's one of those words that has become so generic, it represents everything. When you say, go to the fridge and get me a Coke, or hey, hand me a Kleenex, or where's my chapstick, or let's jump in the jacuzzi. Those are all brand names that kind of became the word that defines what they are. Soft drinks, tissues, lip balm. You get the idea. And virus, of course, comes from the medical industry, but it's really a generic term. And it's important to understand that it's kind of a general category of malicious software. So technically speaking, the definition of a virus from the IT perspective, the security perspective, it's an unwanted and solicited malicious program. Now what's interesting is viruses aren't always malicious. They can be mischievous, they can be problematic or troublesome, they can be annoying, they may be on your system and you don't even know it. But they're definitely unwanted and they're definitely unsolicited, and they're often malicious. They're pieces of code that can potentially damage an electronic system. By strict definition, viruses are not transferred without the help of human or system intervention, and that's what separates a virus from a worm. Viruses are commonly transferred from one system to another in many ways, by sharing data, either data at rest on removable storage devices, or sharing data over networks, downloading files from the internet, the World Wide Web, opening phishing email messages or attachments. There are several ways for us to differentiate different types of viruses. It's important to realize that these definitions are really getting blurred, as most of your malware campaigns actually are made up of possibly 3 or 4 more different types of malware with different behaviors. So a campaign against a web server may use 2 or 3 different types of viruses or malware, all in the same attack. That's important to realize. Now, strictly file infector viruses basically attack executable files, .exe, .com, .bat, and when you execute the file, the virus attaches itself to other program files. Boot sector or system infector viruses basically plant themselves in the system's boot sector and infects the MBR, the master boot record. And then the virus is activated when you boot up the system. And these aren't that unlike a rootkit, where you can get rid of it and then you restart your machine and it's still there. It keeps popping up again. Most of your modern antivirus can handle those types of viruses, but it sometimes takes some special work on the part of the AV. A multipartite virus is also referred to as a multipart virus. And think of this as a combination of a file infector boot sector, but it happens simultaneously. Okay, so at the same time, you're going to attack the boot sector and executable files. So it's combining the characteristics of some of these other types of viruses. Now, I would say the most common virus behavior is what we call polymorphic. Poly in the sense that it can do multiple actions, multiple activities. Morphic in the sense that it can actually change its behavior during the life cycle of the attack. So typically a polymorphic virus will have 3 parts to it. It has the body of the virus, then it'll go through some decryption routine, which will release some more code, and then a mutation engine. And that's the morphic part of the virus. When the infected program is executed on the system, the decryption routine first decrypts the encrypted virus body, and the mutation engine then allows it to do a wide variety of things. Look in the registry for certain values, move up into memory, decompress certain other files that have been placed there. They have a wide variety of things that they can do. But the bottom line is polymorphic viruses are multi-staged, multi-phased. They can change their signatures, and they make it very difficult for antivirus. A lot of your zero-day attacks are polymorphic viruses. We've talked about script kiddies. Well, script kiddies are script kiddies because they have access to scripts. And so a script virus is really 2 different types of things. One It actually is a script written in JavaScript or Python or Ruby, Perl, something like that. So that's the characteristics. It's easy to get onto systems, but script viruses can also attack scripts. They can attack scripts on web servers, all kinds of systems. So when we say script virus, think of two different things. Either the virus itself is written in some scripting language, or the virus target is actually a script on a system. Encrypted viruses are really part of the new crypto malware family. These will consist of a virus detection routine, actually looking for antivirus systems, and an encrypted virus body. These can either encrypt the code with strong encryption algorithms, or it could be for confidentiality, or it could be part of a hashing of the actual code with an MD5, SHA-1, or SHA-2 HMAC. A large percentage of malware today that's being delivered through the threat agents and threat actors at some phase in the life cycle of the virus involves some type of encryption and decryption. Macro viruses have been around a long time. They started out kind of infecting Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word or Excel, and other groupware types of programs out there. They'll, disrupt the workflow by corrupting the document or the spreadsheet, inserting unwanted words. The virus will use the application's own macro programming language, which infects documents and templates, so that if you create a document from the template, it's already got the macro virus, so the new document that you spawned is already corrupted. A companion virus is also known as a spawning virus. It works by generating a file that has the same name and in the same directory as the virus's target file. So it's kind of like a Trojan. So the virus has an extension that the system opens first, which happens to be the malware, the virus. For example, a .com file will be opened before an exe file, and an exe file may be opened before a bat file. In this video, we were introduced to viruses and different virus types. In this video, we're going to explore the worm, which is actually kind of a subclass of the overall virus category. It's a special form of self-replicating virus or malware designed to copy itself, usually from one computer to another, but worms can often massively fill up a single computer first, filling up memory addresses, filling up disk space with bogus little files. But then a worm will generally spread without user action and distribute complete copies, possibly modified copies of itself across the network. Some of the newer worms are very stealthy and they're polymorphic, and so they can actually change as they go across the network. A worm can consume resources, it can infiltrate data, or it can just cause the CPU to waste cycles. In essence, a denial of service attack, making the computer system unresponsive. Now, because worms typically don't have to attach to a host program or a host file, they can also tunnel into a system and allow for remote control of the system. And the remote control is actually being done by a command and control server somewhere probably in the deep web, the dark web. We call that a C2 domain. You'll often hear C2 domain, which refers to the command and control domain, often on the other side of Tor browsers. Classic examples of worms are the Sasser worm, the historic I Love You worm, which was very destructive, Conficker, and Stuxnet is also a type of a worm, but a dangerous worm. Here we see in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to get the worm onto the network through the wired network or the wireless network. We could even tunnel it inside of an encrypted tunnel. If somebody can get access to a system, let's say at a teleworker's home or a branch office, they can get the worm encrypted into the organization that way. If we go counterclockwise and look over in the top left, shared computers with weak passwords will most likely get infected by the worm. This is also kind of a distributed denial of service attack as well. Removable devices, USB, flash drives, external hard drives may get infected by the worm. That's also a way to get the worm into the organization as well. At the bottom, computers that don't have the latest security updates on their security suites or antivirus, anti-malware systems may get infected by the worm. And then computers with open shares may get infected and spread the worm as well. So what we're looking for on the far right are computers with password policies, good physical security, current security updates, antivirus or security software, and secured shares are protected from the worm. Now that's on the endpoint. At the customer edge device, which we see up here, that'll be an edge router or a firewall. That's also going to have firewall protections, probably IDS and IPS protections, and other content security and proxy services to help protect our organization from traffic coming from the outside. In other words, an external structured threat. Here's a case study of a classic worm, the Configure worm, a worm that targets the Windows operating system. It's been around since 2008, performs a dictionary attack on administrative passwords, and it propagates to form a botnet. A botnet is also a type of distributed denial of service attack. It has 5 known variants, configure.a through configure.e. It's also known as Kiddo and Downup. Thousands of systems today are still infected because of the use of several malware strategies which create variants of the Configure worm and different hybrid behaviors. Europe was particularly hard hit by Configure and its variants. Another example of kind of a hybrid virus/worm is a complex stealthy malware, and it actually kind of defies the basic definition of virus. It's called Regin. It's also referred to as Prax or Warrior Pride. This is actually a sophisticated toolkit. It was revealed by Kaspersky, which were the first ones to also find the Stuxnet virus. There were some other people involved as well. I think Symantec was involved. This is another Windows-based attack. Probably the source of this malware is the same source as the Stuxnet virus/worm. You can look that up if you want to. They became aware of this first in around the spring of 2012, but they found some variants that go back even, way back before that. It's infected computers worldwide. 28% were in Russia, 24% in Saudi Arabia, just to give you an idea. It's a targeted multi-purpose data collection virus similar to the Stuxnet worm that came later. Remember, the Stuxnet worm, like Regin, their first phase was really to do information gathering and to send it back to a command and control. They had the ability to initiate a payload, for example, on Stuxnet, which forced the centrifuges, the nuclear centrifuges in Iran, to start spinning super fast, and so they had to shut them down. So these worms can also be destructive. It depends upon when they want to initiate stage 5. Sometimes stage 5 will happen like a logic bomb at a certain point in time, or certain activity happens, or the command and control can actually launch stage 5. In this video, we talked about a variant of the virus called the worm. Another very prevalent type of malware is the Trojan or the Trojan horse. And the Trojan doesn't really describe the payload as much as it describes the way that it gets delivered. A Trojan is going to masquerade as a legitimate program. So if you're going up and downloading off of the internet some game or some other application, maybe a device driver, you found some utility or some tool you want to use on your PC. If you're downloading freeware or shareware, especially if you're at a peer-to-peer file sharing site, Morpheus, Kazaa, one of those torrent sites, it's quite likely that what you're downloading isn't what you think it is, okay? Even a system update and an upgrade, if it's not digitally signed, it could be a Trojan horse program, patches that you apply to your operating system. Obviously, this comes from the Greeks and the city of Troy with the Trojan horse. Some old school Trojans were called back orifice and sub 7. So these have been around a long time. Trojans will now typically install backdoors into the operating systems, software that can be put on a system where they can escalate their privileges and move laterally or horizontally in that system or to other systems. C2 domains, command and control. Keystroke loggers, key loggers that are going to take your keystroke when you're typing in your passwords or your social security number or your credit card information and send that back to the deep or dark web. Logic bombs can be a Trojan that goes off at a certain time or a certain event. Trojans can be part of a botnet where you're a zombie system. Maybe you're going to be in the background without even knowing it. You're sending information to a command and control, or maybe participating in a cyber mining operation. And one of the most clever ways to deliver ransomware is through the Trojan horse. It was obvious to get a Trojan from an attachment in email or going to some website by some phishing attack, but a lot of people got Trojan malware because they would see a pop-up that said, hey, your computer's infected. Click on this link and we'll fix your computer. You can download this software and it will get rid of your virus or whatever. And that actually was the Trojan horse program itself. So they find that's called a malvertisement. And they find, very clever ways to deliver these Trojan horses to all types of systems out there. And we're starting to see them now on, Android and iPhones and other network devices as well. In this video, we talked about the Trojan horse program. Remote access Trojans, or RATs, as they're appropriately called, are specific types of Trojan horse malware. They're often part of a multi-staged, external, structured attack. RATs are known for creating backdoors on systems to give malicious users access to that system. They're often seen in targeted attack campaigns to establish CNC or C2 domain communications. New RATs allow for remote access to mobile devices like iPhones and Android phones. Well-known RATs include Ghost, Poison Ivy, and Sacula. PlugX RATs and other variants are a common choice for nation-states. Here's a quick case study on the PlugX RAT. From September 2014 to February 2015, as part of a long advanced persistent threat campaign targeting India, there were different variants of the PlugX backdoor RAT observed in the final payload. Initially, you can see here the CVE number, 2012-0158. This is the initial exploit. That's what was used. Then, other variants were added as they became available during the campaign. The stored payload on the Indian systems was a new PlugX backdoor. This gave attackers backdoor CNC access to hundreds of thousands of systems with just a slight registry footprint. I'm up here at MITRE.org. Let's go search the CVE list. Type in here 2012-0158. Here it is. We can learn more, the National Vulnerability Database. You can see a description of this particular vulnerability, what it's also known as. You can see its base score, 9.3, it's high, an impact subscore of 10, exploitability subscore of 8.6. You can see its access vector, and then down here, advisories and solutions and tools are available to countermeasure this particular type of code injection vulnerability. And you can see how it's really affected Microsoft Office, Microsoft SQL, BizCommerce servers. Okay, so this database is something you should use on a regular basis. In this video, we talked about remote access Trojans. Without a doubt, one of the most prevalent and one of the most nefarious types of malware that we see today that's affecting all types of users, from just the teenager, on their computer at home, all the way up to the large enterprise organization, multinational corporation, is ransomware. And this is malware that will encrypt key files, and then they'll hold that user for ransom, typically asking for a payment in some cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. Ransomware evolved from some of those misleading fix apps, the ones that would do pop-ups and say you have a virus or you have a system vulnerability or we can speed up your Windows system, just click here. Fake antivirus tools, and then there would be these bogus websites where somebody had to go because they had to pay a fine for some reason. Just, malvertisement basically, but it's evolved into a, multi-million dollar industry. Crypto Locker is one of the most popular toolkits. It's kind of a generic term, actually, for these exploit kits, and they've exploded since really the first one in 2005 was called GP Coder. The average ransom demand has more than doubled, and over 30% of the victims are in the United States. Ransomware will go through different types of life cycles. Here's an example of one where you have infiltration, where you'll exploit a server-side vulnerability to get access to the network. Next is reconnaissance, where the attacker gets information to help them in later stages of the campaign. Maybe they'll look at the backup policy and try to get that ransomware on the backups as well. Lateral movement, where the attackers use publicly available tools to plot out and traverse the network and get access to strategic locations, maybe the intranet database servers. And then stealth. Once the attack has been carried out successfully, the attackers are going to try to hide their tracks by removing any tools or artifacts they leave behind. A new trend, a dangerous trend, is RAAS. You probably heard of software as a service or infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Well, here's ransomware as a service on the darknet behind Tor browsers. A vector is a way to deliver a malware payload. It's the delivery system, it's the mechanism, it's the pattern. Think about how malaria is spread. The vector would be, mosquitoes. Well, the ransomware vectors are commonly through email, email attachments, script files, VBS, PowerShell. They can be archived and delivered like Trojans in zip files, RAR files. They can be done with malicious macros in Microsoft Office and social engineering. You can link to malicious ransomware files in personal cloud storage sites like Dropbox. Obviously, infected websites are a common place to get ransomware, from peer-to-peer file sharing sites, BitTorrents. There's web exploit toolkits to exploit web servers, malvertisements, and just targeted server exploits, where they'll use brute force passwords over remote desktop protocol. Here's an example of something that would pop up, a little simple web page where they've encrypted key files. And when I say key files, don't just think like, system files. We're talking things that are really valuable to the end user emotionally, like all of their pictures, all of their audio files. If they have iTunes on their system, all those MP4s will get encrypted. Video files, so those types of things. And you can see here that they're using very strong encryption crypto systems. RSA 2048 and AES 128 are really strong ciphers. And so they give you steps down there to go install the Tor browser, and then they give you an address on the dark web, and then you follow the instructions on that command and control site. Just one example of what can happen when you're infected with ransomware. Here we see another type of life cycle that would be carried out against a large organization. Step one is the installation. After the computer is infected, this crypto malware, crypto ransomware will install itself. It'll change keys in the registry, and it'll start every time you boot your system up. In step two, before it attacks you, it contacts a C2 domain server operated by a criminal syndicate, for example. In step three, the ransomware client and server will go through a handshake process, and the server will generate two cryptographic keys, one on your infected computer and the second one stored on the dark web on that command and control server. Step four, with the keys established, the ransomware on your computer starts encrypting every file it can find, or certain types of files with certain extensions, like JPEGs, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, AVI files. And then comes the final phase, which is extortion, or asking for ransom. Typically, on an end user machine, they're going to ask for $300 to $500 US through Bitcoin. They don't get too greedy for the end user. They want to make an amount that they could come up with. But with a larger organization like a hospital or a financial institution, they're going to ask for a lot more money. In this video, we talked about one of the most dangerous types of malware out there today. That's ransomware. Let's take a quick little look at a term known as crypto malware. And really, ransomware is a subset of crypto malware. This is the official designation of ransomware. CryptoLocker is one of the most popular kits. But realize when we use the term crypto malware, we're also talking about the fact that in these campaigns, in these exploit kits that have multiple stages and multiple phases, that typically once the payload is delivered through phishing emails or malware attachments or instant messaging, that during one of the phases, there'll be encryption and decryption or either hashing with MD5 SHA-1 or SHA-2. Crypto malware is also spread through drive-by downloading, when a user innocently visits an infected website and malware is downloaded and installed without their knowledge. If it is ransomware we're talking about, victims are not encouraged to pay the ransom, because the bottom line is they're probably not going to give you the decryption codes anyway. The only thing worse than a thief is a thief with no honor. So you want to make sure that all of your systems have all of your data files backed up and that you have copies of all your applications and your license keys and your installation keys. So if you get hit with crypto malware or ransomware, you can just reinstall the operating system on your machine, reinstall the applications, and copy over the data from your backups. In this short video, we defined crypto malware. The word bot is short for computer robot, or internet robot, or malware robot. The bots are the most common form of distributed denial of service attack that we find today. The robot network, or the botnet, consists of a zombie computer, and actually thousands of zombie computers, and a master command and control CNC server on a C2 domain to remotely control victims, and many victims are unaware. As a matter of fact, it's the main goal of the botnet network to hopefully not alert the end user that their system's part of a botnet. The communication between the zombie and the CNC server often happens over IRC, Internet Relay Chat, or encrypted channels, or even bot-centric peer-to-peer networks. As a matter of fact, we're even seeing bots on social media sites like Twitter. One of the reasons why the botnet doesn't want you to know that you have a zombie computer is because they want to exfiltrate data. They want to pull information from memory. They want to log your keystrokes. They even force systems to participate in cyber mining of currencies and more activities. This is typically how a botnet operates. The botnet operator infects computers by sending them malicious bot software. It's self-propagating malware like a worm designed to infect a host and then connect back to the command and control server in the C2 domain. In addition to its worm-like ability to self-propagate, bots can include ability to do keystrokes, gather passwords, capture and analyze packets, get financial information. They can even go from there and launch a denial of service attack, all types of things. A bot has all the advantages of a worm, but they're typically more versatile in their infection vector, and they're often modified within hours of publication of the new exploit. They've been known to exploit backdoors that are opened by worms and viruses, which allow them to access networks that have good perimeter control. Bots will do everything possible not to announce their presence. For example, they won't have high scan rates like scanning worms. Often they won't do any damage to the network infrastructure. They're just trying to exfiltrate data. The bot on the newly infected host will log into the command and control server and then await for commands. Often an IRC server or a web server. The instructions are sent from the command and control server to each bot in the botnet to execute different actions. When the zombie computers receive the instructions, they start generating malicious traffic aimed at their ultimate victim. In this example here, the attacker controls the zombies to launch a DDoS attack against the victim's infrastructure. These zombies are running a covert channel to communicate with the command and control server that's controlled by the attacker. In this video, you learned about bots and botnets. In this video, we're going to look at backdoor malware. And when you think of backdoor, you think of something that doesn't come in the front door. Okay, it doesn't come into an obvious channel. So you could think of this as, let's say, hijacking an existing encrypted SSL tunnel to the organization, where you get on a machine that already has the VPN initialized and you come in through a backdoor there. Maybe you're going to piggyback through HTTP or instant messaging. Backdoors are Trojan programs that are closely related to the results of a botnet or a distributed denial of service attack. In the diagram here, you can see the malicious cracker gets access through some type of backdoor. They establish a session from the compromised machine back to their attacking server or host. The backdoor malware is used to generate a covert channel so that the remote attacker can access and control the system. These are becoming common on phones and other mobile devices. And they'll be even more common because of the Internet of Things, IoT. Backdoors can perform a wide variety of exploits. They can exfiltrate system and personal data, and even pull information from attached storage devices, like FireWire drives and USB flash drives. They can perform denial of service attacks on other systems. They can run tasks and terminate tasks and processes. They can download additional files for an ongoing multi-phased APT. Backdoors can upload files and other content to servers out on the internet or the dark web. They can audit the system's status as part of an information gathering phase of a reconnaissance attack. Often they'll open remote command line shells so that malicious scripts can be run. They can modify computer settings. They can shut down or restart the system. Remember, the backdoor is really the vector. It's really the delivery system for a wide variety of different types of malware. Let's look at a quick case study of a pretty famous and traditional backdoor attack. This is backdoor.makadocs, M-A-K-A-D-O-C-S. It's a classic that targets Windows 8 using Google Docs. This appeared initially as a simple and typical backdoor Trojan horse, receiving and executing commands from a command and control server as it gathers information from the compromised computer, information like the host name and the type of operating system, and what patches and fixes have been applied. In this example, they used Google Docs server as a proxy to bypass the firewall and send information back to the C2 domain. In this video, you looked at backdoor malware. A rootkit is a malware that pretty much is what it sounds like. It's an exploit kit, an EK, that wants to get root level control or admin level control over a computer system without being detected by other authorized users. Root comes from the root user in the Unix Linux world, and typically the goal is to execute malicious activities on a target system at a later time without the knowledge of the users of that computer, so kind of like a logic bomb. Rootkits are modules that are placed in unauthorized areas to access data, to monitor actions, to escalate privileges. So, for example, initially in the early phases of the rootkit campaign, it may just have regular user access, and it may try to escalate privileges to admin access or system access or application account access. It can modify programs. It can be an early phase to conduct further exploits. The malicious software can target the BIOS, bootloader, kernel, system files, and a lot more. They're difficult to detect because they're initiated before the operating system is fully booted up. It might install hidden files, processes, even hidden user accounts, as well as registry changes or other encrypted files. And because rootkits can be installed in firmware or software, they could even intercept data from network connections, keyboard input and output, among other things. In this video, you learned about rootkits. Well, a logic bomb has one thing in common with the real bomb. It can ignite a destructive payload, and it uses some trigger in order to release that payload. The trigger is up to whoever writes the code, but it could be several things. It could be a mouse movement on a system. It could be the end user accessing a file or an administrative user accessing a file. It could happen at a certain date and or time. When you run a program, the logic bomb malware could go off. It could be the number of times a particular code is run or a script is run. Logic bombs can go off during a major event like the Super Bowl in the United States or the World Cup, or even on a holiday. Remember, the logic bomb is not necessarily the actual malware itself, it's the vector, it's the delivery system based on some type of activity happening on the target system. If you identify the logic bomb after it's, quote, detonated, it's usually too late to undo any of the damage that's done. So you want to make sure you have good backups of your valuable data and maintain really good antivirus, anti-malware protection, typically connected to the cloud for regular updates. Keyloggers are actually keystroke logging tools that can be used as malware to typically record keystrokes and send data back to a command and control server. Realize that end systems do provide on-screen keyboards, which may or may not be a countermeasure to a keylogger. It depends upon how sophisticated the malware is. Typically, the keylogging is only one aspect of the hybrid virus that you find on systems now. So that on-screen keyboard may not really be enough. Keyloggers are also used to track employees or to track your family members to make sure that they're adhering to acceptable use policies or make sure your teenagers are doing what they're supposed to be doing on their home systems. Keyloggers are also used to study human and computer collaboration. So like a lot of software out there, it could have good uses or it could have malicious use. Some of the malicious keyloggers out there that are quite well known are PAL Keylog Pro and KeyGhost. You can get special mitigation tools, which are keylogger detectors. They can be a standalone detector, or they can be part of a security suite. Spyware, which we're going to talk about here in a second, also uses keyloggers to capture passwords, credit card information, and other personally identifiable information. Keyloggers, or keystroke loggers. Well, because of IoT, the Internet of Things, it's quite possible that we may be dealing with and living with spyware the rest of our existence in some kind of Orwellian type scenario where every device has an IPv6 address and is connected to the Internet. So spyware, which has been around forever, really, is software that gathers information about a computer user, but not only that, but also about computer actions, but it's doing it without the user's permission. Your own smart TV that you're watching right now may actually have spyware in it. Spyware on the internet can show advertisements, it can track information, it can make changes to endpoints without the user even knowing about it. Malware, adware, and spyware are often found among peer-to-peer file sharing networks, download sites, and BitTorrents. But you can also download spyware from just a drive-by web server. Spyware is code commonly written to perform keystroke logging or to install a backdoor on the system to send information like PII and credit card information back to a server on the C2 domain. Some even consider Windows 10 to be spyware, and as well as a smart device like a home alarm or your HVAC controller, your television, your gaming system, or your automobile. The sites and downloaded programs should be used carefully, since it's difficult to scan for vulnerabilities in advance. So make sure you're getting your utilities and your tools and your applications from a trusted site, and preferably using digital signatures. In this video, we talked about spyware. So you just got home from a hard day at work. Maybe it's a Monday and you decide to sit down with a nice cold drink and go on the internet, maybe Google Images or Bing Images, and look at pictures of puppies playing with bubbles. Why? Because it makes you feel good. It helps you unwind. But guess what? You may be actually accessing malware. Stego malware leverages steganography. Steganography can be broadly defined as anything done by a cracker to hide data in an unexpected channel, like a JPEG or a PNG or a YouTube video. A JPEG picture of a dog playing with bubbles may actually contain destructive malware. As a matter of fact, you want to be careful because graphical links from web pages, even icons on web pages, can contain malware or lead you to a malware server. As a matter of fact, a dangerous banking rat was actually hidden in the settings of the icon file of a website. Some of those graphical links that you click on are obviously there because the person who owns the website maybe is an affiliate, and they want you to click on those icons and those pictures so you can go to the site, and they get credit for it. If you buy the product, they get a kickback as an affiliate. Your best bet, however, is to go directly to the vendor's website and not to go there through some other linked web page. Many stego malware hosting sites are buried deep in the Tor network. So next time you're on Google Images or Bing Images and you're floating around and going and clicking on picture after picture after picture, be careful because the odds are very high that you're going to get a drive-by malware download. In this video, we're going to learn about polymorphic packers, which are a type of polymorphic virus that has the ability to change and move in phases or in stages during the lifetime of the attack, and even several times during a campaign. For example, the packer can start out in RAM memory and then move into compressed RAR files deep in the file system, and then they can even move from there to another system or to another part of the same system. Polymorphism is used in email attacks and drive-by exploits, as well as advanced persistent threats, APTs, once the cracker has a foothold in the network or the system. Polymorphic packers are tools that bundle up different types of malware into a single module or a single package and delivered, for example, as an email attachment. Threat agents use polymorphic packers since they can transform over time and remain undetected by traditional security products for longer periods of time. File binders are utilities that allow a user to bind multiple files together, resulting in a single executable. These are commonly used to inject other malicious code into otherwise innocuous files, making them harder to detect. In this video, you learned about polymorphic packers. In this exercise, I'm going to have you perform 5 different tasks. What I'd like you to do is document the task either on a piece of paper or in a word processor, and then pause your video, go get the answers, and then come back and we'll compare our answers to each other. First of all, I want you to list 4 different virus types. Then, name 4 types of legitimate programs that can be Trojans. Next, list 2 ransomware vectors. Then, name 3 results of a rootkit infection. And finally, list 4 events that can trigger a logic bomb. Pause the video and perform the exercise. The first thing I asked for was 4 different virus types. So we have file infector, boot sector, system infector, multipartite, polymorphic, script, encrypted, macro, and companion. If you said 4 of any of these, then you got the right answer. Next, I ask you to give me 4 legitimate programs that could actually be Trojan horse software. If you said games, device drivers, utilities, tools, freeware, shareware, system updates, upgrades, and/or patches, then you got the right answer. Next, I ask for 2 ransomware vectors. You could have said email or anything related to email like scripts, compressed files or archives, personal cloud storage, infected websites, or targeted server exploits. If you said any two of these, then you got the right answer. Next, I asked for 3 results of a rootkit infection. If you said any 3 of these, access data, monitor actions, escalate privileges, modify programs, or conduct further exploits, then you got it right. Finally, I asked for 4 events that can trigger a logic bomb. If you said any 4 of these, mouse movements, file access, date, time, program execution, number of times code is run, a major event, or a holiday, then you got the right answer. Great job.